We are
Alrighty, good
live.
evening. Yes, we are. Hey, AJ. Alrighty.
Hey,
How you
Jay.
doing out there? You ready to talk about a
Good,
hurricane?
good. Yeah. Something about a hurricane that everybody, unless you're living under, a mountain, knows about this.
That's right. It's our good friend Milton. Not the most intimidating name. I wouldn't have expected that would be the one that would end up being one of the strongest in the Gulf of Mexico when you think about names, but there it is. Milton.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't see that coming. I mean, and Helene happened about 2 weeks ago now. Yeah, I think it
Yeah?
was 2 weeks. So, this one overachieved. I mean, it was 180 yesterday. It
That's
went
right.
down a little overnight, but we knew it would come back. The latest update, you just read it off. It was 165. So, what
Yeah.
that means, it's category 5. That's as high as the scale goes. So that's
Yeah.
so it's not going to go any higher per se, but as far there's no category higher yet. But as everybody knows, the storm is on its path, and really not much change right today as far as the overall picture with this.
Yeah, the overall picture, I mean, it went through its eye wall replacement earlier on this morning. And that's kind of why it did weaken for a little bit. Then it finished that eye wall replacement. It's kind of revamped itself back up a little bit. We haven't seen, it's intensified, but not as rapidly as it did last night. Obviously, that was a whole other thing. But the general kind of model and everything consensus is that it's probably going to hold this intensity. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if it tried to intensify just a smidge more. But I mean, as this thing continues, as we go into the day tomorrow, it's going to start getting into an environment that's a little less favorable. So we will probably start to see, I would imagine, as we go through the day tomorrow, maybe kind of a gradual weakening, but maybe not a big weakening. You know what I mean? Maybe not enough that it won't be there, but enough that maybe it probably won't be making a landfall of 165 mile an hour winds. That being said, that gives you an idea how strong it is that even a gradual weakening still puts it as a major hurricane at landfall. So,
yeah, that's been the forecast all along. So that's probably not going to change. I mean, it's a 5, it's 165. It'll go down, but it's got a way to go to get, 140, 120. It could still be 120, 130 when it hits the coast. So that's the big concern with this. And it's just, going to be kind of pushing the Gulf right up against the coastline here. So that's why we're really concerned, because of the storm surge. They've had some rain down there quite a bit in the last couple of days before the storm hit. I know some folks that were down there that got back home, thankfully, from the Orlando area just in time. But, this only have about 20 to about 30 more hours or so before this gets here.
I'd
There
say
was
probably even a little bit.
yeah. What's that?
So I'd probably say even a little bit less, because I mean, keep in mind, the wind field is probably going to expand a little bit here as we go through the overnight. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the landfall might not happen for until late tomorrow probably, but I mean, the effects of that are already going to start brushing up as we go through the day tomorrow. And I think one of the interesting things to see will be how much does that wind field really expand. As it does kind of a little bit.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing with this, that even if it weakens, it's actually going to be larger, and you're going to have greater effects actually in many places.
Go ahead. I was just to say, I don't know if you saw it last night. That wind radius was, when that thing was rapidly intensifying, that wind radius was small.
It was almost like a mini
Wilma.
Hurricane.
It reminded me a lot of Hurricane Wilma back in 2005, when, went from this tropical storm to 185 mile an hour. And, that really 24 hour, 24, 36 hours or whatnot. And I don't know if you remember, you ever looked at the satellite photos, but when you get those rapidly intensifying hurricanes, things really constrict. And I mean, that Wilma had a pinhole eye. I mean, that thing was probably no wider than a needle for a little while, and it looked kind of funky on the satellite because you had all this clouds, then you just had this really almost tiny looking hurricane that ended up being the strongest one in the Gulf. I think I was looking into it. I think Milton, yesterday when it was, that was I think one of the top. It was like the 5th strongest or whatnot, at least in terms of pressure, I believe it was, because it dropped down. Yeah. It was like 897 or something.
That's what it was. Night. Yeah, it was exactly. It had that pinhole eye, and now it went down and maybe interacted a little bit with Mexico, but the eye just kind of. I read that the eye was down to about 4 miles. 4 miles.
I could believe it.
So
I believe. I can't remember the number either. But I mean, it was a really compact hurricane, which again they tend to be when we have that. I'm just looking here really quickly to see what the current radius is, because I know they just came out with the update, and I know the hurricane hunters are still flying around in there. I'm just curious if I could find the wind radius. I always forget where it is.
Oh,
I've been looking
at.
I've been going to the same. AJ, I've been going to the same site for over 20 years, and I still can't remember wherever. There it is. The hurricane force winds right now are 30 miles out from the center. That is a very compact hurricane.
Yeah, that's still compact.
Yeah, that is very compact. 30 miles out from the eye radius, so only 60 miles total from one end to the other, well, roughly speaking, is where the hurricane force winds are. This thing has 165 mile per hour winds. That is a tight gradient when you think about it. Now, it may expand a bit. I'm just curious, we'll see how much that wind field expands. But, I mean, 60 miles is not very wide, especially for a Category 5 hurricane. But, again, rapidly intensifying ones will do that.
Yeah. So on here, I just wanted to bring this up. This is you can bring the hurricane models on here. I just brought up one of the models here. This is what are we looking at here? This is the HWRF model.
Oh,
see it here. So I'm just advancing this. This is going through time. So actually, allow me to just restart that because it likes to get a little squirrely. There we go. There is all right. So this is the hurricane model projection now, but I'm going to advance it to tomorrow. This is tomorrow at 2:00. So as you said, and this model just came out, so you can see you're starting to get some of the effects near the coast during the.
Make sure you share the screen.
Oh, did it go out?
I think yeah.
Oh, let me bring it back. Yes. So what happens is. Hide that.
What happens is we're not very good with technology sometimes.
Let's see this
I'm not. You're probably better at it than I am.
Do you see it?
No, not yet.
Let's see. I'll bring it back up here because that program is a really good program, but it does tend to suck up a lot of space. So let me bring this back up.
Yeah, a lot of models do that.
Close this.
I'll tell you, go ahead.
Let's see. All right, so we are sharing. Let's see if...
While he works on that, I'll burn the time. So...
But what I wanted to say was that tomorrow the tides are going to start rising, as the storm approaches, and so it's really critical when the storm hits. Is it going to hit a high tide or low tide? And I had some of that information. I'll bring that up in a minute. But
I remember Isabel had that happen when she made landfall back in '03 in North Carolina. She hit right at high tide.
I remember Isabel. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a fun one.
yeah, that was like 20 years ago. Yeah, that was
Yeah, it was '03.
yeah, that hit the Mid Atlantic states. It almost hit where I was, but well, I was in New York, but it went more up to like Virginia and Pennsylvania. But
What
I
was
remember there was
interesting
a
though is
yeah.
it only made landfall at like a Category 2 intensity, but it was because it hit, like I said, right at high tide. It kind of caused a little bit of problem on the Outer Banks.
It was a huge deal there, and especially in Virginia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, southeastern Virginia. But this is a lot worse. Many, at least the intensity is many times worse than than that one was.
Yeah, Isabel, actually, to put it in perspective, Isabel at her peak was only 165-mile-an-hour winds, pressure. I don't remember the exact number for it. So, the one that we're dealing with now, Milton, I mean, this is the second go around. He's already back up to 165. So, yeah, certainly it was, yeah. And not only that, but if I remember correctly, Isabel was moving pretty quickly, though, and also when she made landfall.
Yeah.
This one might not necessarily be moving as quickly, per se. Not like Helene. Helene was really booking it when she made her landfall. This one probably not going to be moving quite as fast, at least initially. But, what's a few hours among friends,
Yeah, that's right. It is going to accelerate a little bit, but you're right. It's not going to go fast. It's not just going to blow out. So it's going to linger over Florida during tomorrow night for a while. So that's why we're really concerned about the surge, but it sounds like everybody's taking their precautions. So I don't think that, especially after Helene, that nobody is going to is not taking it seriously. But I heard people wanted to leave and they had nowhere to go. So
well, and that's the thing, when you get to the Florida Peninsula like that, normally you just go inland. The problem with the Florida Peninsula is you go too inland, you end up on the other ocean. So it's not exactly so in that situation, you got to get a whole metro to evacuate, and they got to go up to, at least probably Georgia to really get away. But again, it depends upon the wind field. I mean, not only that, but do you remember though back in 2005 when Rita was getting ready to make landfall and they originally thought it was going to go hit Houston?
Oh,
yeah. And do you remember the chaos of trying to evacuate Houston?
Yeah, and I was working during that one, and I remember, unfortunately, people were stuck on the highways trying to evacuate for hours and in scorching heat.
Oh yeah.
And looks like we're back.
Yay!
And people died in their cars.
Oh yeah.
So, and the storm never hit Houston at all.
No, it went to like Lake Charles. Remember, because it turned at the last minute.
Yeah, right. It was absolutely horrible, and it hit Louisiana. But I think that in Florida though they've got a better handle on it. But what I was saying is to refer back to here. This is where the storm is going to be tomorrow at about 2:00. So I'm going to advance it 6 hours later, and now it's 8:00. So the eye is right off the coast here. And what that means is that all this water here is going to, the storm is just going to push the Gulf up against the coast. And a lot of especially down here. It won't be as bad. It may be up here. And, Tampa is like right in the middle of basically getting a worst case scenario, which would be really just an awful situation with flooding everywhere. Or if the storm goes a little to the south, they won't get as much flooding. Right now, this model has the eye going right through Tampa Bay. I've never seen that before. So that's why we are here, right, Mike? Not Mike, Tim, because, this is not a small storm. And it's, a lot of people, if they know about it, they'll save people's lives, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, then people ultimately people decide what they want, to do in that regard. But this is one of those ones though where it is going to be, a situation where, especially in terms of like Tampa. I mean, if it does go a bit south, it's going to be breezy with some rain, obviously a little bit of storm surge. If it goes, if we follow that model exactly, that's a straight on hit, which again, even though the hurricane may still be weakening at that point, it still has got that momentum with it, pushing again the Gulf up. This is not a high elevation. No place on the Gulf has high elevation, so it doesn't really take much to get that, to get that inundation, and then compound it with the fact that you have, pretty decent sized hurricane. What's going to be interesting about this too is it's going to start to actually begin to kind of transition a little bit, as it begins to make its landfall. It'll begin to kind of transition, from a tropical system to a regular low pressure. Obviously, that'll take some time, but one thing that may also be pretty interesting is that that could maybe help to kind of enhance the winds at least a little bit on the backside of the system, just given the fact of the way things are shaping out. But we're not talking like too much major effect. But anyways, I don't know where I was going with that. I think what I was going with is that this is one of those situations where, if this thing ends up, let's say, going more towards Sarasota or the Northport area, it may not be as much of a concern the Tampa is expecting right now. The problem is that even this close to landfall, I mean, we saw earlier, if you were following and looking at the satellite throughout the day, you noticed that it, it wobbled a little bit. And that's kind of a thing that these systems do. And even with this type of a system, albeit though it will kind of be expanding, its wind field during this time, that little bit of a wobble can actually make a pretty, decent sized difference. I mean, especially with something like Tampa and the Tampa Bay itself. So even far out, there's still some uncertainty. I mean, because it could decide at the last second it wants to jog, a little bit more to the north, and that could put it, like I said, right literally over Tampa, or it could take it, down towards Sarasota.
Right. Yeah. And I just pull up a different model here. This one it's a little different. It looks like this is the H-Mon. It's still kind of crosses Tampa Bay, but it, like you were saying, it breaks it up more, it seems like, as it comes in. So we would want to see that to help minimize some of the damage. Obviously, it really would have to get like sheared to death to really spare anybody. But for the most part, there's not much time for the forecast to change. But like you said, with the wobbles, if it wobbles a little bit, if it's coming in here, let's say, and then goes like this, or, something like that, you would get more of an offshore wind here, which would be better than if the storm like this, and
but keep in mind,
it's dry.
It'd be better for Tampa, right, but it would be worse for Sarasota.
Yeah, although it would be bad, I think, there anyway. So what we want to see is like just drive this thing like down here into the Everglades, but that doesn't look like it's really in the cards at this point. So what would this storm is? There's only been a couple of hurricanes that have really hit Tampa like this. You probably know the one like in 1848, 1921, and now this one.
It's interesting that when you think about it, though, I mean, for the amount of hurricanes we have a year, tropical systems, it's interesting. This is, it's obviously a hurricane-prone zone, but they don't. It's not like tornado season where you can get multiple, tornadoes passing sometimes within a few miles of each other. Over the course of a year. Hurricanes, it's a bit different. There's not as many of them. And as big as they are, really the strong parts are actually very small of any tropical system. And so it's interesting that, yes, it has been, over 100 years since, Tampa's really been directly affected by a hurricane. But think about it, though. They got close with Helene. Over the years, of all the hurricanes that have tracked through. So they've been affected by multiple hurricanes, but it's almost kind of like a roll of the dice when it comes to, who's really going to get the big impact. Hurricane Andrew back in 92 looked like it was going straight towards Miami, and at the last second, it ended up down towards Melbourne. And so Miami kind of missed the brunt of Hurricane Andrew back in 92. But Miami's been affected by other ones. Yeah. So I think it is very interesting, but the one thing I would say is, I don't want to, we talk about, yes, Tampa's never seen, something like this in at least 100 years. Yes, but it doesn't mean it's any less prone to hurricanes than, let's say, New Orleans or Pensacola or Houston. It's just sometimes it's kind of a luck of the draw per se. It's like tornadoes in Oklahoma. Oklahoma gets tornadoes all the time. Doesn't mean Tulsa is going to get hit every single day, So, but it is going to be interesting. And I think model wise, it'll be very interesting to see, how good are some of the inundation models around the Tampa area, handling a major hurricane, which, to be fair, we don't really have any modern examples of a major hurricane hitting Tampa Bay directly.
No, we don't. No, not directly. There've been a couple small ones that, passed by, and some that came from the east and moved over. But, this is the one that could be the storm for them. So we're going to, the models, like I said, haven't changed very much. So really, now is the time just to, if you were there, to hope for the best, as usual, cliche, and prepare. And I think most people are prepared for this now. If you're not on the coast, you don't have to worry about storm surge, at least. But the winds are going to be real high. The trees will be coming down. We could have hurricane wind. The hurricane warnings go all the way inland. So Orlando and Kissimmee, and I don't know if Disney World's closed yet, but
probably.
They'll be closing anytime. And it'll be tornadoes in front of this too. So as the storm approaches, there will likely be at least some small tornadoes that develop like in here or these outer bands. So we don't want people going onto the beach, during this, like the last one. And there were people that were rescued in the Gulf during the storm. I don't think they'll be doing that this time. With the level of the storm we're talking about. But you can see some of these other towns here, Venice, Punta Gorda, Fort Myers, and even down in Naples here. It's going to be, we're going to have a significant surge down there, although not as bad as farther north. So, and by Thursday, though, this storm will be moving out. So I'll advance this. This is now at, let's make that. That's about 11 o'clock Eastern time. You're still getting good cells here, but the storm is weakening. They'll also be getting storm surge up here, on the northern coast. Not as bad. I think they were talking about up to 6 feet up here. St. Augustine and Palm Coast and all of these. So the morning's going to be a real rough one up there, but it's really down here that the surge is going to be, up to 15 feet. And again, the conditions we say will deteriorate during the day, in the morning, like this is at 8 a.m. Not a whole lot happening. The water will start to rise a little bit, and then it just, like a classic hurricane, just comes in waves of rain and wind, and the water is rising all day. And especially, I want to let me bring up something really quickly here, because I had the high tide times. And in fact, why don't we let's see if we can switch the source here. And let's see. But so anyway, so not much happening. I mean, it'll be okay weather-wise the rest of today, tonight, no problems. And then during the morning, but really, especially in the afternoon, the rain bands will move in, the winds will pick up. And let me tell you, let me just look up, tell you right now what time the high tide is, for example, at in Tampa Bay at let's see, let's pick a point. I'm just on the web here. Yeah, I'm looking at Anna Marie Key, which is one of those barrier islands there. The high tide tomorrow, the 9th. The high tide is at 10th. Let's see. Well, there's one like 2 a.m. Then the high tide's in the afternoon, I think. Let's see. No, high tide, low tide. The high tide is at 3:30 a.m. Thursday morning. So that is not going to be too good because they're still going to have onshore winds coming in there at that time. And at St. Petersburg, I'm checking the high tide here. The high tide at St. Pete on Wednesday, 2:04 in the afternoon. So they'll probably have a little tide rising then, maybe some flooding already then. And then there's a let me see.
Yeah, especially
in
the
intertidal
zones.
Yeah. Actually, I want to make sure I got that right. The high tide is at 5 a.m. on Wednesday. Then it's low tide in the afternoon. Low tide. Then the high tide comes in at St. Pete about 6 a.m. So it'll be rising, although the worst winds probably wouldn't coincide with the high tide right there. So that would be a little bit less water, perhaps. And I'm just going to check Fort Myers here. Their high tide time on Wednesday, they have a high tide 7:20 in the morning, and then it's low tide at 5:02. So this is about 5:02 at that location. That was what was that one? St. Pete or Fort Myers? Fort Myers. Okay, so at Fort Myers, 5 o'clock, the storm is just encroaching on you. And here it is. Here we advance it now. It's 2 a.m. So you're getting strong onshore winds on the bottom part of the storm. And the high tide time at Fort Myers on Thursday morning, let's see. Well, theirs is about midnight. So that's not going to be a good high tide time for them. So the bottom line is, it's better if a storm hit like this hits at low tide. It's going to be kind of in between or towards high tide for most of the places down here. So that is something that we have to keep in mind as well. And, so again, this is going to kind of come in more at night as Helene did. So, we're going to get some pictures coming out from this storm. We hope, Tim, that, if we can get some more shear to come in or something or dry air that the storm could ingest and weaken it as it comes in, kind of at the last minute. I mean, there have been storms that have done that before that have weakened dramatically as they hit, but we're not counting on this with this one at all.
It's a tough hurricane. I mean, the fact that the good amount of rebound it had after that eyewall replacement, is a tough little guy. So it's, I mean, like I said, it's looking really good still on the satellite imagery. Yeah, I mean, it not quite as pronounced as it did last night. Yeah, and there are some expectations that, yes, there will be some dry air kind of maybe interfering with it. Obviously, it has that cold front just up towards its north that'll begin to interact with it and certainly begin to transition it from a hurricane to a kind of a normal low pressure system. Relatively speaking, yes, there is a difference a little bit, but yeah, yeah, it's like I said, it's still looking pretty impressive. I was just looking at satellite imagery here. It looks really impressive. It's still, still got it's going on. It does look like there may be a little bit of an increase in some of the shearing, just a smidge, but right now, again, it still looks pretty impressive on the satellite image. And AJ, with that, I hate to kind of leave you here, but I do actually have to get going. But I will let you wrap up with the final things. But we'll be keeping an eye on this. I know I for sure will be. I do it. Get it? Keep an eye. Hurricane. Get it?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, now I got you. Yeah.
yeah,
So
there you
yeah.
go.
So Abby, it's always better
That's
to
pretty
have
good.
two. Always better to have two than one.
Can you
So we
imagine a
got
hurricane of two eyes?
two big brains. Yeah, there was one I read about years ago. Although I don't think it really had two eyes. It was like they said it's like in the 50s. A hurricane off the coast of the East Coast developed two eyes as it came up. But I'll dig that up for you. I'll show you that I read it in a book. I said years ago, back in the 50s. But I don't think Milton will get two eyes. I think he'll remain cyclopic.
Cycloptic hurricanes.
Yeah.
All righty.
I mean,
I like that. All right. Well, you have a good evening, AJ. I'll let you finish it up there,
yes.
and take care, everyone.
Yes, Tim. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cheerio.
Cheers. Thanks, Tim. Again, we're trying to lighten the mood a little bit here because, we know the seriousness of this storm. But no one knows exactly what's going to happen until it actually does. And we'll just hope that, and it's not just false hope, that the storm could weaken some, because a lot of times they do. Um, in fact, let me just show you a couple more things here. This is a water vapor satellite. And what this shows is the hurricane, obviously here. But if you look up a little bit to the west of this here, look at all of this. This is very dry air that is not, unfortunately, not impinging on the storm that much. It's kind of it's a buffer here, and it's not able to reach it. But if you look at the clouds up here, how they're moving fast, that's the jet stream winds. So the hurricane's being steered by that, but it's also going to try and shear it. So that's what we want to see. So by this time tomorrow, you see how the hurricane is now, and it's scary as hell. But we would hope to see tomorrow that it starts to get that disheveled appearance again as it hits the jet stream. So that would be the best hope here at this point. But we heard about everybody making those preparations, and I think really people took this seriously, and this is not going to be a surprise for anybody. And I don't know anybody. I do, but I don't know anybody close really in the storm zone. But I did know some people who were down there in Florida, excuse me, and they flew back today. They were down in Disney World, and they just missed the storm, and they're doing good. But again, you can see there's the hurricane here, and it's got that donut eye we were talking about. We'll see how long it can hold that, because as we were mentioning, these storms don't retain that intensity for that long usually. But but another thing the storm is doing is that it is over this loop, what we call a loop current. It's like where the Gulf Stream begins. The Gulf Stream goes something like this. It's a band of warmer water, and the water's plenty warm enough, but it's warm. It's even warmer, so the storm is feeding off of that right now, and that isn't good because it's just going to keep getting at least holding its intensity as it moves up here. But you can see the path here. And again, we were talking about, and Tim was mentioning, if it goes a little south, that it'll be a little better for you in Tampa Bay. But really, if we can push it like 50 miles farther south, it would be considerably better, actually, because I mentioned before, the worst thing is to have the hurricane here. Okay, I'll draw it, the storm. This is Milton. And the wind's coming around. What happens is it just pushes that water right up against the coast. As he was mentioning, the forward momentum of the storm doesn't help either, but the winds drive that water up against the coast. That's why you get those surges here in Florida. But if you're up here, let's say, and the storm is down here, tracking like this, the winds are not blowing directly on shore. They're blowing kind of the winds are going to be, if the storm, if the storm is out here, the winds are blowing, and you're north of the storm, it's blowing parallel to the coast. And then when the storm goes by, when Milton gets over here, the winds are blowing like this. You get like this. So it's blowing, you're not getting that drive right into the coast. So that's really, as long as we don't get a direct wind direction, that hurricane winds going right into the Bay of Tampa Bay, they won't get a worst case scenario. In fact, it may not be too bad with the flooding in that if it passes farther up south. And that's what we're hoping to see. But we're not giving any kind of all clear yet because the track is still so close. That's the center line on that as it moves through. But of course, we showed you the actual cone before, and I'll bring that back up here. This is basically the cone of uncertainty, they call it. But the farther down it can go, the better for you in Tampa. Unfortunately, there's really no good news farther south because the storm, you're going to be on the bottom end of the hurricane in Sarasota, down to Cape Coral, and places even down to Naples and Marco. So that's why that we are so concerned. So let me just show you the model again, just to give folks watching a timeline of the storm. Like we mentioned, right now things aren't looking too bad if you're down in Florida. Of course, in fact, let me bring up the radar. This is the what's happening currently in Florida as far as the rain and whatnot. Let me bring that one back up. You see that, and I'll take this off. But here, right now, eventually the storm, you'll start to see it on the radar. You'll see the eye come in, and that'll make it easier for us to track it because the satellite can sometimes be a little off. But you can see the rain offshore. But we're getting some thunderstorms are forming actually just north of the Keys in Florida Bay. And, we have to watch that. And we mentioned that thunderstorms will develop ahead of the storm as the storm moves in. So let me just give you another quick timeline of because people want to know when this is really going to get going, when the storm is really going to happen. You're going to wake up in the morning at 8 o'clock. Okay. And there may not be much of anything going on. This is where the storm should be at 8 o'clock tomorrow. So it's here now. And this is the hurricane forecast model. And then the storm looks as organized then as it does now. But the rain bands will just be offshore here. They'll be rotating around and moving towards the coast. So at 8 a.m., there may not be much happening on the coast. I mentioned the water will start to rise. Not major, but in those high tide times I mentioned, for example, if you're in Fort Myers, this is Wednesday at 7 a.m. is high tide. So let's pretend you're in Fort Myers. And at that point, the water's rising a little bit, but I wouldn't expect a lot of flooding yet at 7 a.m. And then you're going to have low tide at 5 o'clock. That's in Fort Myers, okay? Fort Myers, I'll zoom in here. They're right in this zone here. Yeah, there you see it. Right by Cape Coral. So 5 o'clock is low tide. So as the winds pick up in Fort Myers, you'll be at low tide. So that's good news. So the water will be a little slower to come up. But then, unfortunately, in Fort Myers, the high tide comes in soon after that. It comes in at midnight. So this is now 2 a.m., 11 p.m., 2 a.m. You're getting onshore winds, so you're going to have a very high surge there. And they're saying 10 to 15 feet is what they are anticipating in much of this part of the coastline. So what we saw in Helene was about up to 8 feet of surge on the coast, and it was more like 5-6 feet down here. So the surge will be more than double what it was in Helene. And you can see the thunderstorms ahead of the storm. Now, I also wanted to mention one other thing. The eye of the hurricane as it comes in. Here's Tampa. So if this forecast verified, this is 5 a.m. on Thursday morning, you might actually get into the eye of the hurricane, and somebody will. If that happens, well, you'll have the really strong winds in the first half of the storm, and then the eye goes over your house, and the winds get light, and the moon might come out, and you think it's over, but it's not, because the storm has to pass by. So this is 8 a.m. Now the eye, you're getting out of the eye, let's say around Tampa, but then you've got this side of the storm at 8 a.m. So you've got this to get through on the second half. So in other words, what I'm saying is, don't go outside if it looks like it's ending, at dawn, because the second half of the storm is going to come back and it's going to blow you down, because it has to go through before the whole storm just gets out of your hair. So that's basically where we stand at this point. And again, I'm going to bring up that. Let me bring up that satellite again. Show you exactly again where we are with this hurricane. And so the storm right now is not quite as intense as it was yesterday. It was 180, and it's 165 right now. I don't think much is changing with it. We checked the latest update that came out at 8 o'clock. No change. If anything, the eye might be contracting more, which might mean it's strengthening again. So it's going to remain at near the same intensity for the rest of the night. And then we'll see what happens tomorrow when it gets up in here. If we do see it weaken substantially or not, to at least mitigate some of the damage. So the bottom line is that this storm is on track. The forecasts haven't changed much, except maybe slip just a little bit to the south. And what that means is that, Tampa, you're on the borderline of seeing either a worst case scenario or, a scenario that's bad, like a bad storm, but that you can handle more. And that, you'll have the usual the usual trees down and, electricity going out. But what you won't have is much of the city literally under several feet of water. So that's going to make a huge, huge difference. That's if the storm goes a little south of Tampa Bay. And the other case, we will have, places that will be under several feet of water, and especially right on the immediate coast. So the places like Siesta Key, and I'm going to do some geography here. So the places right on the immediate coast, like these, like Englewood and Venice, Siesta Key, coastal Sarasota. I don't think there's a whole lot of population down here. Sanibel Island is down there, and there's Fort Myers Beach. And don't forget Naples too. You're under the gun. But you can see here, like Tampa Bay, this is the city of Tampa. I mean, you've got a little protection here compared to these areas. The reason why it was so bad here last time is because there's no protection. It's all the water, just sand. I know there's no seawall. So there's nothing really to protect you. But as you go inland, the water has to go up the bay. And if the winds aren't blowing directly into the bay, it'll be more like a bathtub effect, where the wind pushing the water back and forth, sloshing into the coastline, rather than, the storm driving the Gulf straight into the Gulf of Tampa Bay, and you having almost, a situation that you might call almost like a tsunami situation. Although this is not, I don't think the heights of the water won't get as high as a typical tsunami, but that's not a bad comparison. Clearwater, U2. Now farther north, you got Newport Richey, Port Richey, and these places here. You look like you might be north of the storm. It may not be too bad for you, but if it does go over you, it is going to be bad. Cedar Key up here, there's obviously still recovering. This doesn't look like a devastating storm for you. That might be cold comfort, I know, but you don't want another storm coming in as well. And again, I mentioned also, if you're inland, if you're up in all these cities here, the storm is going to come across. So if you're in Orlando tomorrow night and Thursday morning, it's going to be wild with the winds and, some trees coming down and whatnot. I mean, usually Orlando can handle these storms pretty well. Not many hurricanes have caused a lot of damage in Orlando. But this type of the coast, it'll be your turn in St. Augustine and Flagler Beach and Daytona on Thursday as the storm goes by to your south and you get the winds coming in like this. So there will be water rises here where they're saying up to 6 feet in that area. So that's not a horrific storm, but there will be flooding there. St. Augustine does flood fairly bad from time to time. So the bottom line is, well, if you're in the storm area tonight, there's not going to be any weather problems. Early in the morning tomorrow, no weather problems. I see, aside from a little rise in the tides here. And then it's during the day that you'll start to see the hurricane will approach. You'll see waves of rain, waves of thunderstorms, and watch out. There could be some tornadoes. Doesn't mean there will be, but there will be some, I would think. And the tides will rise and the water will start to rise in the areas on the bottom, really where the hurricane hits, and on the bottom end are going to get really the most destruction of the storm, with much less to the north. The East Coast will get it on Thursday, but it'll be about half as bad as what's going to be down here. And let me just see if I have any news items that I could share with you here. And if there's anything new, and people are making the preparations here, as I mentioned. In Florida, people tend to take things more in stride than some other places, and that the hurricane season happens every year, and it's just a matter of when do we actually get one, because we've been a lot of years without even seeing a single hurricane or anything. The 1970s, 1980s, especially 1990s, there were not many hurricanes at all up here. And now we've seen more, and here comes this one. And now you see Milton is hugging the path here. Before he was trying to go deviate a little bit off, but now he's right on what the projected path is, almost as if it was clinging to that. So I would expect the storm to basically maintain itself, maybe go up a little bit as far as intensity tonight, and then start to weaken a little bit tomorrow. But as I mentioned, it shouldn't make a whole lot of difference overall as far as the damage. In some cases, it might be less. We're watching Tampa extremely carefully. As you know, we've got 3 million people down there. If you're down there, feel free to email us, ask us any questions. We're here today and tomorrow on social media and doing live streaming. And of course, the power is apt to go out. If you have a generator, that's a really good investment to have, because if you have one, and your house doesn't get too damaged, you can pretty much go about life normal, more or less, having electricity. Because when you lose electricity, everything goes out. You don't have your refrigerator goes out, and you can't access the internet. Your cell phone can't work. But if you have a generator, you're in much, much better shape. So I hope that folks down here did invest in that, or go to a friend's house. I remember years ago when Hurricane Sandy hit in Long Island, my parents lost power at their house for about 9 days. So it was very tough for them. They had to go to my sister's house, where she somehow had power. And where I was in New York City, I actually was in northern Jersey, and I actually left Jersey during Sandy to go to New York City, thinking it would be better there. And they lost power for we lost power for about 3 days there. Whereas my apartment at the time in Weehawken, New Jersey, we never lost power. So, and my friends down the block, she lost power for 5 days. So you never know sometimes with that. But it's always good to have that plan in place. And this storm will be out of our hair by Thursday. It's going to be gone. And hopefully there won't be any more hurricanes after this hitting the United States. But we still have about a month and a half to go. This is going to be the 5th hurricane to hit the U.S. this year. And we had, of course, we had Debbie, we had Beryl. Remember that? It hit Houston. And I want to mention in that storm, in Hurricane Beryl, there were deaths from people in their homes because the trees fell on their house, and they died in their homes because these huge trees came down on top of their homes. There were a few fatalities from that. And in Florida, some places you have a lot of those big trees, and those are the ones you have to worry about. I mean, the palm trees don't seem to fall as much, but those other type of trees, live oaks or whatever they have down there, if it's near your home, you get out of the way. So if there's a huge tree right here next to your bedroom or wherever you are, get to a room of the house. There's part of the house where you can't get hit by something like that. And of course, stay away from the windows as well. And as far as flooding, that's most of that's going to be right on the immediate coast here. Um, right on the coast as far as the worst of the storm surge flooding. Now, the rain will cause flooding as well. Um, but in most cases, it's not going to be especially bad because, in Florida, we can handle, rain a lot better. But they are talking about as the storm comes by, the northern part of Florida here is under the gun for the most heavy rain. So, well, we'll see about 4 to 8 inches of rain generally. Up here, if you're where I circled, you could see up to a foot of rain because the storm's going to be interacting with a cold front, a jet stream, and that'll enhance the rain aspect of it. So that will, of course, can cause flooding. But I mean, unless you get unless you have like 2 feet of rain, Florida can generally handle that. No one can handle the storm surge if you're in the way. But the rain, we have to get a ton of it. We saw it. Remember what happened, I think, last year in Fort Lauderdale, where we had about 2 feet of rain, and it was a disaster. But I wouldn't expect that this storm would be able to produce that much in the amount of time that it has. But there will, of course, be some rainfall flooding. So that's the way it's looking right now as of at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So just to recap what me and Tim were saying, the storm right now is on its way. It's behaving itself as far as it's going with the forecast set. We haven't seen any unusual deviations, really, just the usual wobbles left or right. But you can still zoom in on the storm now. And there you have it. Okay, so it's following this line. It was moving just east for a good while. In fact, some people were talking about when is it going to turn? When is it going to turn? But it has made that turn to the northeast that we expected it to do. And the question is, as far as whether we see, a monumental amount of damage, is whether the storm is going to go over Tampa Bay or not. And right now, we can't say for sure. We're hoping that's going to be a little south. So if you're in the storm area, feel free to watch our updates. We'll be updating Facebook and X as well throughout the storm. You can email us. We have the new app Weather Valet also on your smartphone. In fact, why don't I just bring it up here? That is our new weather app. It just debuted. You can check it out here. You can see it here. I'm holding this up. Weather Valet. You can find it on your smartphone here. And, we're a new weather streaming channel. So we're going to, we're getting lots of people, lots of feedback saying that they like what we're doing. And we're here, to serve you. And especially in storms like this, whether it's the tornado season or the hurricanes or the winter storms. But it's these that, of course, are the most serious. The fortunate thing, at least with a hurricane, is that not as much with this one is that at least it's a relatively small area that gets affected. Unfortunately, this time it's going to be larger. But I will say that if you're in, say, Southeast Florida, you're likely not to see too many bad effects here. But even in Florida, we have tropical storm warnings in effect. I do believe. Yes, tropical storm warnings in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach. It's the whole Florida peninsula. The only place that you're escaping this is the Panhandle, really. Thankfully, in Pensacola, Tallahassee. But if you're in Miami, Wednesday night, Thursday, you could get some gusty winds coming through there, and even a couple tornadoes even near there as well. And so So that's the way it's looking right now. So really, central and southern west coast is the area that's going to be most affected. So I think most people are starting to are grasping that. And when this goes by, hopefully we won't hear about many fatalities because people took the warnings seriously. And once it's gone, everybody chips in and everybody helps clear out the damage, whatever it might be, with this potentially historic hurricane. So I'm going to close the stream in just a moment. But again, feel free, like I said, to find us online and ask us any questions at all on what is going on with this hurricane, um, Hurricane Milton. So, and if anything changes, of course, especially if there's any kind of sudden change in the track, we're going to update you on that in the morning for you there. And it's in the afternoon, later morning and afternoon that the storm is going to be starting to build. So we had people in the last storm go on the beach, and that was a different scenario. You're not really going to be able to do that as much with this storm. And I'm not telling anybody to do anything, but you'll notice that the Gulf of Mexico is going to rise during the day, and but sleep. You'll at least know tonight, if you made the preparations, you're all ready to go. If you boarded up your house, if you got supplies, as I said, you'll be fine. Because once the storm goes by, it's over. And then eventually the power will come back, and it'll be just a memory. So we'll continue to update you on this hurricane. I'm Anthony AJ, and Tim Albertson joined me. And we hope to be back on again to update you on this historic hurricane, Milton, that we are watching. So be safe, everybody. And our thoughts are with you, and everybody will make it through just fine.